All right, I'm going to go ahead and get started here. Welcome, everyone. My name is Carson McPherson-Krutzke. I'm the Community Engagement Coordinator for the Hazard and Climate Resilience Institute. And we're so pleased to have you all here for our final panel of the academic school year, which is titled Building Sustainable Community Connections, Developing Projects with and for Communities. And this series of panels has been supported by the Resource Nexus for Sustainability Grand Challenge, which is an effort that's been going on this whole year, thinking about how we at the university can be doing work related to sustainability topics that are community engaged, and how we can better create policies and practices at the universities that can support those kinds of efforts. And so I think this topic today is really foundational to this effort that we've been trying to think about this year with a diverse group of people from across the university, but also community partners. And so I'm really excited to dig into it with our panelists today. Before I do that, I'd like to give a little bit of intro to give some context on these panels. So we have a few goals that we're trying to hit on over the last number of months, and these are to connect across disciplines and sectors, to learn about some of the ongoing projects and organizations here at the community, but also, or here at the university, but also in the community, to find out how university researchers and students can support local efforts and information needs, and consider what kinds of actions we can take moving forward. These topics that we've had panels on for the last number of months have been very diverse, and they've all been under this theme of community resilience and sustainability. And so I think it's helpful to include some definitions for what we are talking about for those two terms. So we define community resilience as the capacity of a community or region to adapt to change and thrive despite the chronic stresses and acute shocks they may experience. For sustainability, we're thinking about meeting the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. And throughout these panels we've had this year, we've touched on a number of these different sustainable development goals. And today, I think it'll just be really interesting to talk about how partnerships play into sustainability. So I'm excited to jump into that conversation here shortly. I am joined by Mike Stefancic, who is the Assistant Director of Community Partnerships from Service Learning at Boise State University. And I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to him, and he will be running the facilitated question part of the panel. And then we're going to have about 10 minutes at the end for questions. So if you have questions as we're going through, please do place those in the chat. Take it away, Mike.
Well, first, thank you, Carson. Much appreciated. And it's been a pleasure co-planning this and bringing everybody together. And thank you for this opportunity to highlight some of the great partnerships that have emerged here at Boise State University and what we can learn from them. And so that's really the plan here today. And so we're joined here by some great individuals that represent two different partnerships, and some of the questions that we'll ask today will really hope to bring forth some of the learnings and some of the experiences. So as you see on their screen, faces, maybe you can match them to who's talking here as we go through, but I'll give you a little overview, or at least highlight them. First, you see Dr. Gail Shuck. She's a professor of linguistics and director of the English language support programs here at Boise State University. And also joining her is her partner, Kayla Grote, from College Bound Program Coordinator from One Refugee. And then our next partnership group is represented by Rob Anson, who's an emeritus professor here at Boise State in the Information Technology Management program. And then also Steve Biachica, who is also emeritus professor, organizational and performance and workplace learning. And they co-founded a performance lab together. And then their partner, Randy Ford, who is the chief operating officer at Idaho Food Bank. By allowing them to talk a little bit about their partnership and add to their introduction as well. So can you add to your introduction and talk about the origin story of this relationship and this partnership that is merged between each one of you? And I'll call on Gail to start first, and then we'll kind of go from there.
Okay, thanks, Mike. Hi, everybody. And also thanks, Kayla, for being here. I'm really glad your schedule is always so crazy that I'm amazed and gratified that you came and were able to attend today.
Really happy to be here.
Well, so I'll start from my perspective on the origin story for why I felt the need for partnerships, and then the organization that brought Kayla and me together. So as director of English language support programs for Boise State, my job is to try and figure out how to foster access to higher education for students from multilingual backgrounds, and also to make sure that they succeed once they get here. So that's an enormous job. I work with, of course, international students, but less so than I try to work with refugee background students and immigrant background students because they don't identify themselves on entering Boise State. So, and there's no identification of who might need a little extra language support or a lot of extra language support when they graduate from high school. There's no signal or marker on their transcript. So I have to rely on people and groups of people and organizations to let students know that there are resources here on campus, that coming to the university is not out of the question for most students, to try and figure out how to support them. So I have especially connected with a lot of refugee agencies, and there's a group in town that some of you, maybe most of you may know about, called Neighbors United, which is kind of an octopus of a committee of people who want to support refugees in all sectors. So I'm on the adult education subcommittee of this group, Neighbors United. It developed out of the mayor's office back when Dave Beater was mayor. So I met Kayla through that organization to coming to a Neighbors United adult ed meeting. And I think I'll let Kayla talk for how her origin story of this partnership.
Yeah, so I first met Gail at the Neighbors United Adult Education Subcommittee probably about 5 years ago. So at the time, I was working on a project for the International Rescue Committee, which is one of the larger resettlement agencies here in Boise. And I was working on a project to build out the IRC's youth services. They resettle a lot of youth, but they are kind of disconnected from the organization and services. So part of my project related to my master's degree was to propose a program for the refugee youth here in Boise, and I chose to focus on education. So I was in the process of building a program that eventually came to be called College Bound. And I met Gail at that Neighbors United Education Subcommittee. And Gail is the kind of person that you want to look for when you're looking for community partnerships and university partnerships, because she's passionate. That was incredibly evident the first day I met her. She was very motivated and passionate to serve the refugee community. And so the partnership with her was a no-brainer. You know, she's, like Gail mentioned, she is looking to help bring services and resources and identify those students at the university who are coming from a refugee background. College Bound, on the other hand, it's a college readiness program. So we have the incoming college students, we have that population, we're working with them. And part of our goal is to connect them. You know, one of the big risk factors for refugee youth entering higher education is not knowing where to go for support. There's so many resources, so many services for them to connect with, but they struggle with self-censorship and just not knowing how to connect in with those programs. So for us to be able to connect with Gail has been incredibly helpful. It's achieving our goals of helping our students navigate university and providing services for that. So College Bound now is a full-fledged up and running program. We've been adopted by the One Refugee organization, and we have served, I don't have count, hundreds of students over the last 4 years. And the partnership with Gail has been just really foundational to that.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing that and how you both came together, filling gaps and just building that relationship and finding that common passion seems to be a real key theme. Next, we'll move over to our other partnership group here and have them share. Let's start with Randy from the food bank. Do you want to start from add to the introduction if appropriate, and how did you meet these two gentlemen?
Well, I was fortunate enough to meet both Rob and Steve in my first couple of weeks at the food bank. So I just hired on as the COO and coming into some process improvement work that they were doing and with our food flow. And really, that was just kind of our end-to-end supply chain start in looking at waste reduction and just overall, it wasn't really about cost containment per se from a profitability or nonprofit standpoint. That's not really what we use. But we were looking at waste reduction and doing the right things with, in terms of financial stewardship and donation stewardship within the organization. So they were working on reductions of processing time from receiving to donations going out. And then we've had a couple of other interactions with their group in terms of, helping our government commodity programs work a little quicker, have also additional waste reduction because we don't want any food to either expire because of not handling right through an inventory system. Just overall really trying to push for the sustainability of both our donations that come in and the aid that provides to people experiencing food insecurity within the state. So really it was fantastic working with them. I continue to we kick around all these different ideas all the time and how we can help one another. And I think it's created a fantastic partnership between the university and the food bank. And we continue to foster that through all of our different levels of the organization, if it's programs and partnerships, if it's nutrition education, and even within our community outreach side. So it's been great to get to know them and work kind of hand in hand with them. And then they got to ask all the questions at the beginning that I didn't have to, and it made me look even better during that process.
Excellent. Well, I'll turn it over then to Rob and Steve to fight over who wants to chime in next.
Rob was one of the first people I met when I first came to Boise State in 2007. And we spent a long time trying to figure out how to work with each other more. Years pass. One of our Opal alumni introduced me to the Idaho Food Bank's Food and Safety Compliance Manager. And students in our needs assessment course conducted 2 assessments for her, one for warehouse safety and the other for food safety. Both of those efforts found causes of performance gaps that were arising from broken processes and volunteers and staff sometimes not having the skills to perform certain tasks in ways that met standards. So students in our organizational performance and workplace learning courses in instructional design began creating training that started addressing the skills gaps. Fast forward, and the food bank later asked us to help with the food flow process itself. So in February of 2020, Rob, I, and 2 other Opal grad students conducted our first workshop, and we did it in person. You've seen process improvement workshops, right? Whiteboards, sticky notes, lots of people mapping things out and representing how the work gets done. Well, that was great, and we were ready to do more. Then came COVID. So we figured out how to do the workshops remotely using Zoom and a whiteboard program. And we continued working with the food bank to address all parts of the food flow process, and started working with Randy when he joined the food bank.
So I'll just throw in like 2 other aspects of that. First, Steve and I were kind of attracted to each other first because both of us had come from industry. We had come from consulting backgrounds. And so we were both kind of oriented toward doing as much as toward teaching. And so we both kind of started doing a lot of real project, real client, student team working relationships, and we built a number of relationships out in the community. So I mean, that was pretty critical, I think, for our background. The other thing was that when you're sending out interns, one instructor can supervise a number of interns, which is very cost effective. It's efficient, right? But there's only so much consulting, so much work that you can do with those individuals. And that's the problem, especially the way my department was set up. And we didn't really get time for spending much more time with students who were interns. There was a little bit of a frustration there, because when you're talking about bringing students into something that's pretty intensive, like what we're doing with facilitation of teams and working teams, etc., you need to really get them hands-on, and it takes a lot more time. So we kind of were able, when we retired, we were able to kind of shift toward an apprenticeship model instead of an internship model. And that's made a huge amount of difference. And we have graduated, so to speak, a few students now who are into, just fantastic jobs based upon those skill sets that they were able to develop real time, working closely together with us.
Awesome. Well, thank you for kind of sharing that and more of the process. And I really heard a lot about how things evolved in your relationship over time, and how they've grown and emerged. And I think also to highlight too, both Steve and Rob working in different departments on opposite sides of the campus, so to speak, finding connections and working together to collaborate also created, I think, a great environment too to engage with the food bank and bring multiple perspectives into addressing some of the work that you all were collaborating on. And so I think this shifts into kind of a good next question here is really, has your partnerships evolved and how those have engaged in? So how has your understanding of partnership changed since you entered the relationship and the partnership that you're speaking about here today? And I open that up to the group, however you would like to comment on it and share. Yeah, go ahead, Steve.
Process management lab, and I'm going to post some information about it in the chat, has worked with the food bank to the point where we pretty much designed ourselves out of a job, or at least out of the old job, and we're hoping for a new one. Hint, hint, Randy. But we've also worked with other nonprofit clients here in the Treasure Valley as well as out of state. And one of the things that I've really come to understand is our take on service learning at the Process Management Lab is to help organizations, especially nonprofit ones, grow their capacity to meet mission and serve community. And we do that by helping them improve their internal processes. And we were really lucky with the food bank because we had incredible support from that organization in doing this work. And we had support from the executive suite on down, and from all the people in the warehouse doing the work, from them up. And all of them passionately interested in improving food flow, especially during all the time. But we were doing this during COVID. And I think our ability to take on this task really requires the level of sponsorship that we enjoyed throughout our time at the food bank. we've since had that in some of our other clients and not as much with others. And we can really tell the difference I think we've been able to make given variable support from the top down and the bottom up.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing that, Steve. Really like how different layers and the buy-in from that became really important to sustainability and continuation of that. That's a great takeaway. How would others respond in that way?
I could kind of counter on or add to what Steve is saying as well. You know, their work was really the introduction to process improvement within the food bank as a whole. There hadn't been as much of a focus, just either based on necessity or in a lot of terms scarcity within the nonprofit environment. You try to do more with less, you know, and you rarely go back and look at your previous processes to see if they're creating more for less as well. So it really gave us the, you know, that ability to look and help define problems rather than just to talk about the problems, to get to more root cause. And, you know, he talked about designing himself out of a job. In a lot of ways, he designed learning into our jobs within the food bank. So we had to learn new skill sets, bring in specific skill sets when it comes to food banking. But without that initial problem definition happening, you didn't know you needed to go down that road. So as much as it may, you know, it may not be that the next step is with the same group, you have a better direction coming out of that initial consultation or even multiple consultations with the groups.
Wow, that really dove deep too, and thinking about, yeah, identifying those root causes, continuing to unpack, and I like what you said, you know, designing learning or giving you the ability to learn and empower you and your staff to take that on is being, I think, a great kind of takeaway. Gail and Kayla, are there things that you've learned about partnership and that changed through your own relationship?
I'll jump in. I would echo Randy that when you work in the nonprofit world, partnership is survival. You know, you're trying to do a lot with very little resources. And I think no one is more creative than professionals that work in nonprofit. So building the partnership with Gail and the connections that she has created for me with others in the university is helping us do a lot with very little. And I wouldn't say that my understanding of partnership has changed, but it has really, really allowed our program to put it into practice in a way that is helping us to thrive.
Yeah, I would add that I think seeing the mutual benefit of the partnership, that it's not just I'm supporting Kayla, it's that Kayla's supporting me. I mean, I can't do my job without being able to have those people in the room or those people in conversation who are helping me figure out new methods, new processes for reaching students. Working with admissions also has been crucial in this process because Kayla and Andrea Orozco, who's in admissions, and I have worked together to make sure that students always have an opportunity. Students in the college-bound program always have an opportunity to come to Boise State, to be able to meet us so that they have a familiar face. And I think that helps me know what Kayla is working with, what kinds of challenges she's dealing with, and also sort of what her plans are for bringing students to campus or having people come to talk with the students when they were off campus. I think it requires us to listen, you know, and I think that to be able to know, okay, so this is what you need. This is what I need to be able to figure out. Maybe we can somehow figure this out together. And I think it's that mutual benefit that keeps it going. It is more time, you know, I mean, we know that it takes some time, but also it has allowed us, like you said, Kayla, I have connected you with other people on campus, which means that then the network grows. It's not just a two-way partnership. It's this bigger network that we just happen to have some connections within, and then we can expand the types of partnerships and the various kinds of support that grow across the whole network to be able to do the kind of work that we both are. I mean, Kayla said it or great, best earlier, like just passionate about. Like we want to serve people and know if we can help people make their lives better by somehow putting in structures in place that then, that's what it's about. So, yeah.
Oh, that's great. And I love how you're painting that, you're giving that web and that network and what almost the ripple effects of these partnerships can be. And that understanding too, that, the partnership is not just 2 people, 3 people, but it does have the potential to be so much more, especially connecting with large entities, and there are multiple levels. We also heard that from the food bank and how they're working at all different levels. The key piece of that mutual beneficial aspect of this relationship is also, I think, a really important thing to kind of take away, and you illustrated that quite well. And so I think if we think of partnerships as being mutually beneficial, they're reciprocal, we're both getting something out of that partnership. I wonder how those type of things then impact or prepare you to take on hurdles or roadblocks that emerge. So I'm wondering if you could talk about maybe a time in your partnership where you did run into a stumbling block, a hurdle, a challenge, and yet you were able to move through that here over the time that you've been working together.
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in there. So I feel like, well, I'll start out with, in general, we get a lot through the College Bound program. We get a lot out of our partnership with Boise State and with Gail. Gail has connected me to Andrea Roscoe in the admissions office, who has been able to partner with us to bring our students on campus, do specialized tours for them, connect them, individual connections to the different departments and resources on campus. Our students are getting support from the Writing Center and the Career Center, which are also, I'm seeing a lot of the same passion that, I see from Gail, that they are very eager to provide their services to our students, and we are very eager to connect them. So one of the hurdles that we hit this past year is we run College Bound as an in-school option in high school classrooms, but we can't be in every high school. So we also serve it as an out-of-school program. And finding a location to run our programming is a ever moving target. And we lost our venue that we were running the program out of. And Andrea Roscoe, through the partnership with Gail, was able to advocate for us, because Boise State has a really beautiful partnership with refugee service providers community-wide, and has recently signed a memorandum of understanding, kind of pledging support to the refugee community, and an effort to make sure that all of Boise State's resources are accessible to all students. So we, when we needed space to run our programming at the university, there was a huge barrier there of the cost. I mean, it's really expensive, even just to rent the projectors and the space. I mean, it's, again, for a nonprofit that's stretched thin, that really inhibited our ability to do the work we were trying to do. And Andrea was able to fall back on that memorandum and advocate with, the leaders of the university and say, we have pledged our support and our dedication to the refugee community. This is not supportive. And was able to grant us the space. So we're able to run our programming, which is extremely supportive to our students, to not just be able to talk about college settings and university resources, but to actually bring them to the college every week. And we go to the writing center, we go to the career center, we go to the library, we immerse them in a college going experience. You know, our students are prepared by the time they're ready to enter college. And I couldn't have done that if I hadn't started that relationship with Gail and she had connected me with all of these other support networks on campus.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing. That was such a great story. And I think how we share our resources and find those and make those connections is how we were able to get over some of those hurdles. I wonder if from the food bank and the process improvement lab folks, any barrier or challenges that you ran into in your partnership that you were able to overcome?
I think we're still in the process of overcoming one of the largest ones. And it wasn't so much of it's a hurdle really, because we're in the process of moving forward. It really wasn't a barrier. During the work that the process management lab was working with us on food flow, one of the largest kind of caveats that kept coming up in all of these different discussions and all of these different process mapping was our paper-based system. It was like the bane of our existence and all of these different movements of processes. And not to, I know way too much about it to share in an hour, but to kind of boil it down to is like, in order to move a pallet in a system within the food bank, it took upwards of 15 minutes, because it's all manual and you look at how much time that paper sits. So through all of this, we, over the past year and off of the recommendations from that process mapping, we've been upgrading our system and actually gave us all of the different quantifiable positives and go-gets from that process, improvement workshop led us to create a need for investment and prove to the board of directors to be able to go after. And so over the past year, we've been doing that. It's a big effort. And now, I'm happy to say, like, knock on wood, it keeps going this way. But instead of 15 minutes to move a pallet in the system, it now takes less than a second because it's all electronic. And it doesn't take 3 people to do it. It takes a person to do it. So, there's some bigger enhancements that we had to make. And that's really, it was like a hiatus from other improvement because we know this was the one that was the big go get from those efforts.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing that. And yeah, I can see how that is a hurdle, something that can be achieved, but through your partnership and your work, you were able to kind of overcome that and make a huge improvement. 15 minutes and multiple folks to one is in a click of a button, I assume, from what it sounds like, it is a huge step and able to overcome that. So
you can design a pool of water for a horse, but it takes a lot of money actually to help them to drink. So there was so many things that were around that system that needed to be improved, and Randy has just done a fantastic job, taking them into the next eon here.
Yeah. And I think also to a point that you all made earlier in engaging also with, executives within the organization, all the way down to folks working in the warehouse. And I think that's a key point in how we impact change within in partnerships, is including everybody and making everyone part of that. And I think that really probably contributed to the success of being able to overcome that.
Yeah.
I
was just going to share on the learning side that has happened as well, is that we now have people achieving their green belts and black belt certifications that were non-existent, because this became part of the way we speak in our culture, and the way that we're doing business is about, the process and not the person. And then the person is the key to making that process more efficient and effective.
Mm-hmm. Black belts, green belts. Is there something else the food bank is undertaking that we're not aware of? Are we allowed to talk about this, or can you tell us more about what this is?
It's all we have. as people elect to, go through Lean Six Sigma training to get their green belts and black belts. Yeah.
All right, so yeah, taking that, just wanted to clarify that for folks, so we weren't too confused on
Yeah,
what
it's a
the food bank
jujitsu class. Yeah.
Beware, they're out there. So as we're kind of getting close to kind of wrapping up time, I do want, this is a question from a registrant that's here in the room. You know, for everybody, I think if we think about what are the things that either the organization or the university could do to help ensure, you know, sustainable partnerships. So what is one thing that the university or partner or agency could start doing? And what's one thing that they could stop doing or continuing to do? So something that they're currently doing. So I know this isn't a question that we that you maybe have thought through, but yeah, so what's one thing that we can start or stop or continue to do?
I'd like to throw out one that has been kind of nagging at me for a number of years. Now, I've been away from the university or not a faculty member for a few years now, so things may have changed. But what I felt like I missed was there were people working with nonprofits and government agencies and businesses, you know, all over the university, working with having their students work with people or faculty working with them. And, you know, there was no way to really find out who else is working with that client so that we could actually hopefully perhaps even, you know, make something larger than what we were just doing, or getting some background that may help us to be more effective with them. So
awesome. I think that's great and leverages one of the points that was made that Gail and Kayla had found in success, and being able to expand their network really helped get over some hurdles. So I think that's a great thing that we could start doing.
I just want to echo. Oh, sorry, Mike.
Oh, go. Yeah.
I would just wanted to echo what Rob just said, because there's a lot that's happening on this campus and people are doing all kinds of creative things. And I would love to learn from more people. You know, the service learning program has really been central. And I would say this even if you weren't here, Mike, and if even you and Cara, I know I saw you earlier on this call, but it's true. Service learning has brought together people, had reading groups, had, you know, book circles, and also, you know, has the service learning exhibition at the end of each semester. But yeah, what are other people doing? You know, these partnerships are not necessarily service learning, all of the good work that's going on. So I know that because there's also this refugee agency and Boise State partnership agreement, this memo of understanding, that brings together people, but that's only people who are working with refugee organizations. And so what about all the other really interesting community engagement that's really happening on the ground? What about bringing all those people together so that we can learn everything that's going on? Isn't there a central, could there be, I don't know if there is, maybe there is, but a central kind of place on the website, for example? Where are community partnerships happening? Here's a place, and people can go, oh, so-and-so is also working with College Bound. I had no idea, you know, or whatever. And I mean, Kayla would tell me. But yeah, I think having the work that we're doing to create and sustain these partnerships is enviable, I think. I mean, other institutions talk about what we're doing here. And so it needs to be publicized.
Yeah, Gail said that really beautifully. And I would just reinforce that I think it's easy to be tempted to do your work in a bubble and forget to keep that collaborative mindset. But I think the strength of the Neighbors United committee is it's created a very tight-knit refugee service community. We know what's going on and we know who's working at what organization and what their mission is. And I feel like there's more and more an increased desire to collaborate. And remember that programs aren't in competition. We're here to collaborate and support each other, and maintaining awareness of what's going on in the community, what the needs are of the population we're serving, our refugee population, but as well, what are the needs of our partner organizations that are trying to achieve the goals of serving those people. And Gail just does a beautiful job of staying connected. I mean, she's created beautiful partnerships with CWI, and we have been able to in turn create those same partnerships. And a lot of our students funnel through CWI first and then transition to Boise State. And the programming there is so collaborative that, even Gail's club, the Multilingual Student Alliance, they stay in close conversation with what's going on with the International Club at CWI, and those efforts are integrated and they're learning from each other. As well, Gail is doing work internally that my students need, and our program really needs to be able to support our students in terms of educating professors on the needs of their multilingual students and their refugee background students. And she's working hard to prepare an environment for our upcoming college students where professors are aware of needs and challenges, and they're better suited to support our students, understand them, understand their needs, and have that desire to support them. So the work that she has going on is just vital. And I think, so I guess in short, to answer the question, keep that collaborative mindset. None of us are working in a bubble, and, maintaining that passion around the work, and learning what's going on in the community, what are the needs there, and how could we support?
If I could add, it's, sessions like this are neat because we get to hear about lots of things going on across campus and across the community that we didn't know about before. Seen a different way, that disturbs me a lot. And it disturbs me because there are lots of different communities of practice inside the university system that are doing this stuff. Kudos to Mike and Kara at Service Learning for being, a huge community of practice, and for their ability to reach across other communities of practice inside the university and across the state and beyond. Kudos to social sciences, who has their students doing internships with nonprofit organizations, to the policy folks, health science folks, to the English folks. But we don't, unless we're lucky enough to accidentally meet each other, there's no system in place and no one at Boise State in charge of caretaking these communities of practice for two purposes. One, for us to be able to find each other. More importantly, for nonprofit and other clients from the community to find us, a single point of contact, and access to all sorts of different resources at Boise State. If you're smart and you're the food bank, as Randy was saying, they know that they can access lots of different resources through Boise State, and they've done that and continue to do so. If you don't have that enlightenment, you're on your own, and you're left to, looking through a directory and hoping maybe a department chair might help you. We need an accountability for this larger management or caretaking of this community of practice, and all of us who are parts of it, and all of us who tread from one community of practice to another. But until we have that kind of structure and accountability in place, we're going to keep, hoping, gee, maybe I can encounter somebody else who's really good, who could help us advance these good things that we're all doing. There are better ways of doing this.
Yeah, I can add to that, Steve, as well, as that, I'm listening to some of the conversation, almost as an outsider, versus a participant, and I'm hearing all of the things of concern, that the food bank has systems and processes for, because we manage 482 partners statewide, along with other resources and connections to other nonprofits, and and all of that. So this is maybe, without this type of a conversation, without this kind of conduit of information, I wouldn't know that we could help in the same way, to where we have processes and systems set up, for client and customer relationship management, and what that looks like, and how those opportunities are logged in a system or repository. We do all of that. So I think those are kind of a key learning here, is like, hey, I'm not just a receiver, this is that mutual benefit of this conversation.
Wow. That's awesome. That's a great note to kind of bring things full circle, that we have a lot to learn too from our partners in our community. They bring a lot of assets, and they have a lot of things that we can learn. And so that's at the heart of our partnerships, is reciprocity, that mutual benefit from one another. So at this time, I think we want to open it up to, if there are any questions, either putting them in the chat, or I think raising your hand, if that works. Carson, you want to take it from there?
Yeah, it's a little hard to see everyone if you raise, but yeah, if you go ahead and raise your hand, that's great. Or just go ahead and put questions in the chat. And while you're taking a moment to write your questions, I wanted to just bring up one question that we had as well, and maybe we'll do just quick responses to this so we can hear from folks who have questions. But I think a lot of these partnerships require a lot of trust to be built, right? And that happens over time. And so for faculty or students who are wanting to engage or develop new partnerships, do you have any just recommendations on those initiation and then also building trust over time? I know that's a big question, but see if you can give some quick responses for that.
I hope I'm understanding your question right, but I will share that, when you're trying to build a program and you're just in research and development phase, you're trying to learn what the needs are, what's going on in the community, who are my stakeholders, how do I find them? It can feel really overwhelming, but you just start one place at a time. You find an organization that has a similar mission, or whose work kind of aligns with what you're trying to do. You connect with that person. It might be a dead end. They might connect you with someone else, redirect you, or they might have, oh, I can't help you. I've got 3 wonderful partners though that would be a perfect fit for you to talk to. And it's networking. And they'll connect you with someone else who will connect you with someone else. And it takes time and patience, because like Steve was saying, there's just not perfect systems in place for this to make that easy. You had to pull your sleeves up and be willing to do some work, but it's really rewarding when you find someone like Gail, or you find that stakeholder who's equally passionate and really motivated. They're excited to hear from you. They're excited about what you're working on, and they want to support. And you just sometimes have to build that from ground up.
I'm going to add, keep your ally antenna up. I have noticed that I have become good at figuring out who shares similar kind of values or interests or something like that. And then I notice those people and I pay attention to those people. And I love knowing that I can go to coffee with somebody, have a coffee date with somebody, and that's work. Like that is part of what I have to do to maintain this network. That is part of the work. But knowing, who has said something that makes me think, oh, I need to keep you in mind. Just keeping those antennae up, I think, are really important for that. And then you don't have to build the trust because you already share something.
That's a really good idea. And in addition, I think the other is reach out to nonprofit leadership and start asking questions about, the things about meeting their mission that are giving them concern. Ask them about things that keep them up at night. Ask them if we were to give you a magic wand that were to help you get anything you want, what would it be? Because you can't do work like this if what you're proposing is of no value to the client. You know, you can't be a source of additional work. You know, you need to be a source of benefit. And so part of this is, you know, being able to align your efforts with things that the client organization actually cares about, rather than saying, I have a solution, do you want to buy it? Or can you use my students? Or can you use our services?
Thank
I
you.
think
Steve. That's a great point. Sorry, go ahead, Randy.
I was going to just add on to what Steve said there is that, you know, the purpose is to find the problem, not to sell the solution. And I couldn't agree with that more, because, you know, there's always some software that's out there that can fix something, right? But that relationship and that kind of impartial, you know, third party that comes in to help you navigate through, in my role, that's invaluable, because the only stake they have in the game is to make it better. It's not about another agenda that's in the background. So that's a huge part of building that trust.
Thank you so much for sharing, all of you. I think those are really great points. And I was hearing take one step at a time, you know, reach out to people who have aligned missions, and then be there to listen, I think is a huge takeaway. And I think oftentimes, at least in the research community, we aren't always trained in that way. We're taught to think of interesting research questions, but we don't always ground that in what community needs are. So those are all really fantastic takeaways. Thank you all. I'm not seeing any questions in the chat, but I do have some that folks wrote in from previously, and feel free if folks think of things as we're going through them. We probably have time for one or two questions. Let me just see which ones would be good to pull in here. I guess, so one of the questions here is why do you think your partnerships are so successful? I think, you know, you've touched on some of these, but what are some specific examples or ideas that you think you could speak to? Yeah, Steve.
I think maybe two things. One is an empathy for the client and the work that they do, and a profound appreciation for that. I grew up poor, and there were times twice in my life, my family was food secure. One when I was growing up, and later on when I was an adult. And thanks to things like food banks, I'm able to do the things I do now. The other is honesty and transparency, and, you know, the ability to, you know, tell clients these are things that you're doing that seem to be really on target and really good, and also being able sometimes to share bad news. You know, you certainly could do this, but it may produce these unintended consequences. Is this something you want to do? And then that willingness to go back and of both parties having the empathy, both parties having the trust, to know that whatever comes up, we can get through this together because we're good together and better together than if we weren't.
Thank you, Steve. Other thoughts on that one? So why do you think your partnership has been so successful?
I would go back to mission alignment. I mean, if I was trying to force a relationship with another institution or organization that wasn't a natural fit, like was mentioned before, it just feels like more work on someone's plate. But a partnership with the university for us is our work and Gail's work would be inhibited. We could only go so far on our own, but we found the right organizations that are working towards the same mission, and we can accomplish so much more. Gail wants to find those students so she can serve them. And we have the students, we're looking for the resources. I mean, you just have to find the right organization. And then once you find them, you're working towards the same goal. I'm not breaking this relationship with Boise State anytime, and I don't see vice versa. So just finding the right organization, and then you dump all your resources into your strongest partnerships.
I love that. Thank you so much, Kayla, for sharing. Yeah, Rob.
So there's this other dimension here called time that I find was one of the most difficult pieces as I was trying to work with other clients out there in the community, because academic time doesn't quite align oftentimes with the organization's timeframes and when they need to do things. And so what really attracted me to this seminar right now was thinking about is kind of changing the thinking to long-term partnerships rather than individual. Can I work? I've got some students, or I've got a wrench here. Let me fix something for you. It oftentimes takes time to align the time frames and get those in sync, especially when you're dealing with when you have students involved. Real challenge. So
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And that is very true, right? We operate at the university differently than community operates. And so being upfront about those expectations at the beginning of projects and trying to navigate that is critical. So thank you for sharing that. We only have 3 minutes left. And I have a couple things I want to share just about this being the final panel. And so I just want to thank all the panelists here today. It's been such an enlightening conversation, and I'm just so grateful that you decided to share your time today with us. And I also want to thank Mike for the wonderful facilitation and helping develop this panel and build it out. So I just want to take the last couple minutes and give a quick recap of some of the panels that we've had this year. We started these panels in September. And as you read through them here, you can see that we've really had a very diverse set of topics that we've been talking about. And these were all informed by a Jamboard that we did last August to see, what do you want to know about sustainability? What kinds of panel topics should we have? And so we've had folks from all over different parts of society. We have had ranchers, environmental consultants, municipalities, local government, and more. We had 29 different panelists and over 350 attendees. We had 354 attendees for these panels. And so it's just been really great to be talking about sustainability here on campus and what that means and how diverse of a topic that is, and really learn more about what the community needs are related to this topic as well. Finally, I just want to point out the Grand Challenge project that we've been working on. I know there's a lot to digest here, but I can send out a flyer afterwards. And this is a summary of some of the work that we've been doing. And so part of this is doing community engagement to think about sustainability in terms of projects and research and what we're doing. But another piece of it is funding community engaged research. And we are still in the process of granting a number of groups who've applied that are teams of Boise State faculty and staff and students who are working with community partners to do a specific project related to sustainability. And so this information is just summarizing some of that work that we've been doing, and we'll be sending this out a little bit later. So again, I just want to thank everyone who's been attending these panels this year and wish you a lovely summer. And please reach out if you have any questions on this work or for any of the panelists going forward. So thank you all for being here.
Thank you.
Right.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you for organizing.